Okay, my name is Griff Byte, and my brother and I and my son operate a farm ranch operation here in northern Montana, ranging from down here at Kevin, Montana, and further south a little bit, up to the Canadian border, east and west. And we raise typically what in the past it's a big barley and wheat country. We've raised peas for several years now, 6-7 years. And we've incorporated that in our operation, and now we're trying to diversify even more, and that includes diversifying through rotation and diversifying through cover crops. At the time I didn't know how much N they would fix and stuff like that, but we just heard there were some benefits to them, and we kind of got into them. We started with Austrian winter peas, which I personally probably wouldn't do again, but that led us into down the other roads, and now We've done yellows. We're doing low yellows this year, but we're primarily raised green pea varieties, upright green peas. We've raised some vine peas as well, some green ones we did last year. At the beginning, it was probably more driven by the market and maybe a little bit of diversification. But now the focus is kind of switched. You know, although we have a lot of acres of green peas. We have over 5,000 acres of green peas in this year. We won't have that many again. You're limited on your rotation on those anyway as far as disease goes. But I can fairly say that peas are a good solid part of our rotation, and I would estimate that we'll always have a couple thousand acres into peas. But we're looking to diversify that even further, especially with broadleaves, and even more specifically some warm season broadleaves like safflower, possibly some sunflower. And also garbanzo beans. We've raised those for a couple years now, and they're a good rotation as well. But
what went wrong with the Austrian peas? They didn't like.
I wouldn't say anything went wrong with them. Part of it was we didn't probably know how to raise them as well either. But they're a vine pea as well. If you don't have a flex header, you know, which gets right down in the dirt, that's something you'd use for lentils. They're difficult to combine. They'll be quite short. By the time they dry down, they're only a few inches out. You're in the dirt the whole time. So they're going to be harder on your machinery. They're going to be, you know, the market I don't think is quite as good in most cases. And you certainly, or at least I don't believe you get the yield that you can out of the upright ones. But again, they do fix in. They can be a good part of a rotation. I think they would be good in a cover crop situation. We're not necessarily looking to harvest. I'd say about 2 years ago, I really switched as far as the soil health perspective. Now I'm trying to look at almost everything from a soil health perspective first, and then do the economics of it. You know, okay, soil health wise, I need to consider something like this for a rotation. Let's say I need safflower, I need a broadleaf. I need to scavenge some N from deep down, or get some nutrients from deep down. That's what you use the safflower for, or sunflower. Start looking at it from a soil health perspective first, then the next step would be to look at it from an economic standpoint. What makes sense money-wise, you know, so try to go soil health first and then figure out my crop from economics next. Actually for me, it was a little serendipity like a lot of good things. I just happened to run a Ray Archuleta. I listened to one of his deals on YouTube. And it really intrigued me, so I started digging further and further into it, and he's a pretty good spokesman, and he's out there a lot, and he's on YouTube all over the place, so I've encouraged a lot of people to listen to him, and you know, and then the more you look at it, and he's pretty good at pointing out that, you know, you got to be a positive person. You got to, and in our area, you know, a lot of people here would dismiss it by saying we don't get enough rain, we don't do this. I think you got to make those principles, which I believe in, you got to make those principles fit what you have in your area. So that's what I'm attempting to do is work that into our operation and what cover crops can do for our soil and then for our operation. So it's all a little different. We're lucky enough to have cows. Well, long term, and I think that's why a lot of people don't like, is they're scared of the moisture. We're roughly, figure 12 inches, maybe 14 inches. Can go down to 8 or 9. You know, we're not a heavy moisture area, but typically our rain months are May and June, and about the end of June we're about done. But last year, for instance, we still got a lot of showers in July. You know, we had a good rain year last year. And it's hard to say a typical year anymore because it seems like every year everybody says, wow, this is a weird year. And it always seems to be a little different. This year it was really cold early and crops got a late start, but yet, you know, frost came out of the ground late. We're still trying to get some crop in. Sometimes it worked just fine. In some places it didn't work as well. My philosophy on that is, again, I'm buying into the soil health thing. A lot of people would say, look at chem fallow, try to save moisture that way. I look at it as starving the ground. You're going to evaporate a lot of that moisture anyway. You're not covering it. You're not harvesting solar energy and moisture year round. I think you're starving the ground, you're wasting time. You're wasting energy, solar energy. So what I think a better attack on that is, we have fallowed last 4 years very little. None in the last couple, and a little before that. And so I think having a cover crop or anything on the ground where you get good cover, you protect the ground, and you retain the moisture you do get, and you are putting down roots when you do get something. I don't think you're really saving moisture by fallowing. So my perspective is, use your cover crops, put something in there every year, get something out of that, and hopefully build your residue enough at the end that you know, you'll really make money with it. Because if you get good cover on something, you're gonna keep the soil temperature down. You're going to maximize the moisture you do get. It's not going to evaporate out on you as quick, and you're going to shade out a lot of weeds. So the trick is to try to get enough of that residue on the top. Still find equipment that will get through it, like a good disc drill, a no-till disc drill, or something, so that you can take advantage of all those things. What we're going to do next year, I hope, is I was pleasantly surprised we run primarily Case equipment, and not to say we don't have some John Deere stuff, because we do, but Case surprisingly came out with a pretty good disc drill, which has not been one of their strong suits, but we demoed one this year.
A no-till deal?
Yep, and with disc drill. And it was very effective. We're very happy, especially going through pea stubble, which, even though if there's one knock on peas, it's they don't have a lot of residue.
Right.
There'll be a lot of foliage out there, but they don't really have a lot of residue. They don't have a lot of cover. So they're an excellent crop, I think, and you harvest them early. So they're a good target to come in with a cover crop right after you harvest them, right? Because you actually have the time. We're a little late this year. A lot of times you'll cut those at the end of July. So you still got a couple, 2-3 months of growing season left. But the difficult part about coming in behind peas is seeding. And you use a hoe drill, you better make sure you cut those peas really short, because if you cut them just a little bit green and the vine comes out green, it doesn't break down as fast, and you have some real issues with a hoe drill if they're cut just a little bit high. We had some hailed out stuff last year on peas. It was a good pea crop. It was probably 50 to 60 bushel pea crop, and it got hailed out. And getting back into that was real difficult, but we demoed that disc drill on that. We went 7.5 miles an hour through it and never stopped once. Had good quick emergence. It was a barley crop that we put in there. Good quick emergence, which we had tried to do the other 70 acres with a hoe drill. Let's just say it took a while. Didn't do a very good job. Did the best we could and moved on. Yeah. I mean, we tried a lot of things, but it was just a waste of time. The disc drill, I think, is a key component to trying to use cover crops. There's no other way around it without it. It's the element to me that's the missing piece, the hardest one to find for us. It's fine. The big thing with the disc drills, real quick I'll mention, I'm not an expert on equipment by any stretch, but the two big problems with disc drills are getting enough down pressure so you don't get a lot of hairpinning, and the other big issue is maintenance on them. If you have rock or something, how often are you changing those discs out? And they claim this one will go 8,000 acres before you have to do all that, and there's fewer moving parts than they've had in the past, and they actually hope to have a lot less maintenance. I guess time will tell. It was a new drill this year for them. I think somewhere in the middle is where we should try to meet. I think the organic people were more into diversification and did some good things that way. I think the no-till thing had some good things that way. How we're trying to approach it is going from, we're not going to go organic. we're trying to get to use less fertilizer, less chemical, but use it when we have to, and kind of go back towards the organic, all right. But we wouldn't, you know, I think trying to go organic right out of the gate right now for us would be a disaster, because we don't have enough stuff on, enough cover on the top to shade out weeds, and that's typically what the organic farmer has to battle all the time, is getting rid of those weeds. And so without using herbicides, you don't have a choice. Well, and you know, it's the thing about, that's the fun thing about farming right now. There's a lot of change out there. We're learning a lot more. It's just a matter of a lot of trial and error, making a lot of mistakes, quite frankly, and figuring it out. And that's what it's going to be about for us. How we're going to try to address it, now I'll find out how pragmatic it is, but we already have quite a bit of diversity right now. We have a lot of millet, we have a lot of flax, we have a lot of, even the waxy barley, some of that stuff. I want to try to get our own seed and do our own cover crops. I want to put in 5 acres of cowpeas, see if I can get them into maturity. Put in a few little radish, turnip, see if I can do it. See if I can do it. If I can, I'll have to buy it. But, you know, raise our own, get a couple cleaning mills. And this is an Archuleta thing too. He'll tell you that numbers will show you between 8 and 12 will give you the most poundage per acre. You know, less than that, you'll hurt your poundage. I mean, if you want a lot of growth, 8 to 12 seeds peaks out. Once you hit 12, it kind of levels out. Maybe you lose a little. No, I'm talking species. Different species. Because they're all, and I think the term Archuleta likes to use, they're more collaborative than competitive. They had a good test plot there in North Dakota that he references, and we went out to North Dakota and saw it, some of the stuff they were doing. When they had radish and turnips, they only had 1.1 inches of rain, if I remember right, a little over a month, and they were about this high. When they were by themselves in a monocrop, when they put them with a few other species, they're a little higher. When they had them with 7 or 8, they're about this high. Twice as high. They benefited from the other plants growing with them. And, you know, they're all doing different things for the soil. And that's the approach we want to take. So I see the millet quite a bit. Millets, the red, got the reddish right here. Yeah.
What's the big broadleaf? Is that radish or turnip or what?
Yeah, it's either, I'm not sure. Yeah, it's one of the two. So all our cover crop mixes that we put in so far and that we will put in this year, we've probably got another 3 to put in yet this year. We'll have at least 8. I think the mixes we used here were 9 and 10. 9 and 10. And so I'm kind of a believer in that. I'm not saying there wouldn't be a place to just put some rye in and try some of that. I mean, I'm willing to try a lot of things. So we'll see. I'm excited to try it. Some of the cover crop, one thing I learned this year is maybe I got a little impatient. We got some Russian thistle, especially on this one up here. And I'm hoping that the warm season will outgrow it, that it'll start taking over, but there's a ton of it out there. And again, if I would have been able to use a disc drill in there, I would have cut that down a lot because it disturbed the soil, got the weeds active. Because we had trouble getting through it. It was peas last year. It was Colombian vine peas, which are real hard to cut. I'm hoping that it'll be interesting to see if those, as it warms up and it stays warm here, if those will outcompete them, get a little deeper roots, and outcompete the thistle pretty good. And I anticipate that will happen, but we'll see. Next year, though, I think I would move my seeding back just a little bit, maybe a week, 10 days, wait for that first flush of broadleaves, and get that with the burn down, and then seed it. I think it would give it a little bit better chance. Of course, you kind of got to go with the weather. When are we going to get rain? When are we not going to get rain? You know. But that's one thing I think I learned. Another thing might be to put it in just a hair shallower. Ours turned out pretty good, really. But see, that's one of the troubles you have with the cover crop mix that has a lot of diversity. Peas do well at, you know, at least an inch. Probably 2 inches is better for peas. And a lot of the legumes are that way. Well, the grasses are just the opposite, you know that, a ½ inch, 3/4 inch. So you end up kind of splitting the difference and hoping they both can live with it. But I think running a roller over that, maybe making it a little more shallow, you don't really care if those peas get to maturity. And that's what happens when you don't seed a pea deep enough. It'll grow, it'll still have peas, but it won't be as big and as healthy. Grasses sometimes don't emerge, right, if you don't get them shallow enough. So I think a good compromise might be to shallow it up just a little maybe. I think we went a pretty good depth this year. Shallow it up just a little bit and maybe roll it. Maybe roll the cover crop, get a little bit better seed to soil contact for those grasses, and maybe you'll have a little better result out of them right away. You know, they might get up quicker. So I just look at mix to mix. What do you want out of that mix? You know, are you really hoping to fix a lot of N? Maybe you go a little deeper. Or is your mix a lot of legumes? And there you come back to the diversification of your mix. What's your cover crop supposed to do for you? If you are in your regular rotation, or if you're missing a lot of one of these groups, which usually for us is warm season grass or warm season broadleaves, and you're not going to actually grow one of those in your rotation, you want your cover crop to do that for you. You want your cover crop to pick up that piece you're missing. So it's just different things, different years, what you want out of that cover crop. Because we'll be doing some peas, and we're going to put some late seasons in right after we get done cutting. We're going to come right behind them with the drill and put some in. Okay, you'll have, I don't have the mix right in front of me. I don't have it here. It's actually at the seed place right now. But a lot of warm season stuff, depending, you know, if you still have a lot of warm weather left, use that. But you always include radish and turnip and some stuff that will come on when it starts cooling down. You want stuff to keep growing in there as long as possible. One of the soil health, you know, principles, keep something growing there as long as you can. And those radish and turnip will grow a long time. They'll grow into November and even December sometimes. So you want something that'll still flourish when it's warm out, but yet something to take over when it cools down. You want activity to keep going in that ground. That's a good question. Hairy vetch is a good one. That's one I've really been looking at a lot. We do have some vetch in the fall mix. I know that. Yeah, and it fixes in well, and it doesn't. Nice thing about the vetch, it doesn't mess with your legumes as far as rotation goes in promoting disease. It's not like field peas, chickpea or garbanzo beans, even soybean. Some of those will tend to pass on some disease, and hairy vetch isn't one of the ones that does. So it's probably the safest legume to use for that, as far as if you have legumes in your rotation already. Well, we hope to fit in more all the time. We're gonna start calving out later, late April, early May. We hope to use some of them for cover crops then. We hope to put them on cover crops in the summer, have a few hundred acres there. And then in the winter, we hope to have a warm season one that gets big, let it grow all the way, and let it snow on it, and then use it then. Cut down on our feeding. And the whole idea is to mimic nature a little more, let the cows be cows, let them start doing their end of it instead of babysitting them all the time. It sure makes it a lot better if you have cows. But, we're at an all-time low for cows right now anyway. I think it's an opportunity to, if this catches on, for other people to rent pasture during the winter. Cows do kind of take it full cycle and make it work better. However, I don't think it has to be just that way. I think the benefits still outweigh the cost. Compared to cow fellow, you're in the red every year then, We don't have any wheat this year, but yeah, we have insurance, and I don't feel I really an expert or know enough about it even to talk about it too much. The insurance side of it and where it's headed. I just hear stuff. I don't feel comfortable that I know enough about it. Yeah. I usually ask my insurance guy what he thinks, and we're very fortunate to have a good one. Yeah, he's also an agronomist too, so that helps out. We're a pretty almost unique situation for us there. It's not easy. I think we had 4 or 5 crops that we had to go outside the county to get a bid on. But I see change coming there too. For instance, chickpeas this year are insurable across the state, every county, which 2 years ago, who would have dreamt that? There's some things that irritate me with it. For instance, green peas are insured at the same rate as yellow peas when the price is $4 different, $3 difference. Sometimes that's a little hard to understand. But in an area like ours where we raise a lot of malt barley, it makes malt quite easily here. So there's a lot of people that insure the mulch part of it too occasionally. But barley prices are down now too, so we'll see where that goes. Okay, I wouldn't say we're very progressive in that way. We're going to start probably this fall, start moving a lot forward with the Haney test and start looking at it that way. And probably this fall, I've held off the last year or so. Wait till we get some of this stuff going, but probably this fall, next spring, we'll be a lot more aggressive in that area. But again, we got to start getting more residue on the ground. There's a lot of things we got to shoot for to get where we need to be. So we're just trying to figure it all out. This is locally. I've heard people talking about when's the proper time to terminate the crop. When is the proper time, you know? I mean, to me, you let it winter kill. That's how you terminate it, because that'll maximize how long it'll grow in the ground. And so to me, I don't see any reason to terminate unless someone put a crop in there. If I lived in a warmer climate and I had an early season cover crop and let it grow, then burn it down with glyphosate, terminate it, and then 2 days later seed it, I get that. But the only time we're going to terminate something is if we're going to seed something right after it. Otherwise, I want something growing in that ground the whole time. To me, what I'm going to shoot for, especially on this one, the cool season one, I want to graze it down. In fact, the cows got in it the other day. Didn't plant it, but they did. Graze it down, but the last time they graze it down, later in the year, I want to leave about 3-4 inches, enough to give it cover, as much cover as possible, and still be able to seed into it next year. Okay, I included a cover crop chart with our handout today because I found it to be really useful. And when looking at diversification, whether it be putting together a cover crop mix or looking at possible rotations. And this particular chart, you can find it by Googling cover crop chart and NRCS. It's usually about the first thing that comes up. The thing I like about it is, on the computer too, you can click on any of these and it'll give you a thumbnail on salinity, tolerance, water usage. Even on the front page, it'll tell you relative water use, and it's all on their little square there. It'll say low, medium, high. Growth cycle, is it annual, is it biannual, is it perennial? And then the plant architecture, upright spreading, or prostrate. And all these little things are indicated in the corners of the box. You click on these on the site, and like I said, it'll give you a thumbnail. So it's basically got the 4 groups, and it's broken down here if you look closer at it. Cool season, warm season. And then between the cool and the warm, it'll break it down between grass and broadleaf. Okay, warm season grass, cool season broadleaf, warm season broadleaf. And then the legumes, of course, is handy to know because they fix in. But when you're looking at a rotation and you want diversification, you want to hop amongst these 4 groups. And if possible, I think, especially looking at it from a management standpoint, as far as getting rid of weeds, you go from broadleaf to grass. Broadleaf, grass. Alternate every one at once. Occasionally you might have to go broadleaf or something. I think that's a little bit, but make sure it's warm season to cool season or vice versa. I don't think you ever want to stay in the same one. As I mentioned earlier, nothing does better on itself. We put cool season grass on cool season grass. It won't be as well. It won't do as well. And that's the case with everything. So I think this is quite a handy chart to use for a mix. You want a little out of every group. If you want diversification for your soil, and they grow better together that way, and also when you're looking at a rotation. So I think it's a pretty handy tool, and that's why I included it in our handout today. The four soil health things are, number 1, minimal disturbance of the soil. Don't disturb the habitat except when you have to introduce seed or do something that way. Do not go underground where the habitat is. Leave it alone. Try to disturb it as little as possible. The next one would be get as much cover as possible. And on that, just for the things I talked about earlier, you want shading. You want to keep the temperature down, soil temperature down, especially in the summer, obviously. You want to maximize your rain by not letting it evaporate out and your moisture evaporating out so fast. And cover from, and especially in our area, you know, we're quite windy like several other places in Montana, but we're very windy. And we have a lot of cold in the winter. So, I mean, you want some armor or some protection for that. and that's what your residue will do for you. The other thing is, and we touched on this a lot here last few minutes, is keep something growing there as long as you can. And you look around, and to me, the harvest solar energy and moisture. You look around, and mimic nature fits all four of these. I haven't got to the fourth one yet, which is diversity. I'll throw that in there. When we look at nature here, look at the prairie around us, and this is an Archuleta thing too, but you know, when I look around here, it's so obvious. Do we disturb the habitat, the soil in our native ground? No, we don't. It tries to give itself as much cover as possible. If you were to go out here and take a plow and plow that, first thing that's going to happen is nature's going to respond with some weeds. Try to give that ground cover. That's its first response. That's weeds' role in nature. So when you see a weed, that is telling you there's a problem. It's just doing what it's supposed to do. We're not going to eradicate weed seed, but it's telling you that's the problem. So it grows up to protect, but 3 years later, those weeds won't be there. That's not how nature works. It's not going to have a Russian thistle patch there for 200 years, right? The other stuff's going to come in, and we're going to have diversity built into that over time. And we've got thousands of years of, ground changing and evolving into what it is. And there's a lot of diversification in the prairie, whether we realize it or not. I just said all we need is a wet year, and all of a sudden we see flowers we've never seen for 20 years. If we see a real dry year, there's some stuff there that likes the heat and a little moisture, and it does well, so it's putting roots down. That ground has diversity built into it. So when we look at mimicking nature, I think we use all four of these points and try to emulate it as much as possible. And I like the Japanese guy that gets referenced all the time in this soil health stuff. And if you've read any of his stuff, the One Straw Revolution is quite good. Is a little philosophical at times, and he ties it into his personal life a lot too. But the guy's very interesting and very good at what he did. And some of the stuff he did with his rice fields was pretty amazing. But on that, I like the thing he said, and I paraphrased here a little bit, but when looking at a problem, think what I cannot do to make things better. How can I not do something and make things better? And a lot of times as man, we like to strong arm everything and just, I think we need to be a little more in touch, instead of looking for the next spray that'll kill the next weed. We can do it, but eventually nature outsmarts us and beats us in the long run. So I think we have to look around us and use our common sense a little more, use the great technology and chemicals and stuff that we have as tools when appropriate, but don't overuse them. So that's when I come back to the mimic nature is just a good rule to use all the time. And it's one you hear in the soil health arguments all the time, and I believe in it. So those are kind of the four I guess pillars you would say of the soil health movement. And I agree to them. Just got to figure out how to make them work here.